Hey guys, and welcome back to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. I am your co-host, Ray Russell, sitting here in the sunny Florida sun of 1976, and sitting along with me is the man himself. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Bob Roop.
Nice to be sitting in the sunshine. Not quite as same here in Michigan, but it's good to be back. I've been looking forward to ever since we ended up last week. I've been thinking about, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite times, because it was at a part of my career where I was moving upward at a pretty fast rate, and just about all my matches were with. I mean, everybody's important, but it depends on, if you're the first match or second or third match. It's a lot different than when you're in a main event or co-main event or something like that. The matches mean more, and the other thing is you made more money. And that was the measure of. That was
key, making the money.
That was a success. If you made money, you were successful. If you didn't matter how many titles you had. In fact, we were talking about titles. I'll remind you that my first title, one half of the Southern Tag Team Championship, I won it so easily I never even had to go in the ring. It was awarded to me. Myself and Buddy Fuller were declared the Southern Tag Team Champions, even though I'd never even heard of it at the time. They found some belts that were somewhere in a closet. The one they handed to me had dust all over it, but they had a battle of belts coming up, and they were looking.
Needed more titles.
They wanted every match from the top to bottom to be a title match. Like TV title, brass knucks title, tag team. Buddy and I went out there. I think it's interesting. I wish I'd have known him better, been closer to him at the time. I could have congratulated him heartily before the match and said, "Hey, buddy, I got to really hand it to you, all I had to do was tag up with you." And I immediately became a champion. I didn't even have to wrestle for it. So
yeah, you've been in the business something like 6 months at that point, just kind of handed over a belt. Jerry Jarrett was really good for that in Memphis, just pulling out belts whenever they needed it, especially for those type of Battle of the Belts type shows. And the joke was always, let's see which belt's in the drawer this week for Jerry Jarrett. So it's kind of like the situation there with you guys in the Southern title. That was all the way back in 1970. That was your very first championship belts. And those titles would come and go. I think that was the last run there in 71 or so with those particular title belts, but they would come and go prior to that whenever they were necessary to the cause.
Sure. It dresses up a card. It makes it sound more important.
Sure, absolutely.
And, 90% of the fans at that time and even today, they're not looking at past history. They're kind of into it for what it is today.
Right.
The fine points are not, and the details to them are not important, really. The fact that to me, it's amusing. I could be a champion. I was such a great wrestler. I was awarded a championship without ever having to even get in the ring.
Right.
I thought that was pretty cool, but
always a good time. Always a good time in Florida, and that's why you're back here in 70. It will come into the tail end of 74. You're here all throughout 75, really building up your stature as part of the Championship Wrestling from Florida roster. You've established yourself as a main eventer here in 1976. You're going to stay another full year with the company after that big run throughout 1975, where you defeated one Cowboy Bill Watts for the Florida heavyweight title right there on TV, of all places, back in July of 75. And the Cowboy on his way out of the territory, but he kind of passes the torch over to Bob Roop at that time. And you were the Florida champion for a while there, heading into the fall, before you lose that to the American Dream, baby. So you're sandwiched between a couple of legends there, Bob. You defeat the Cowboy, you drop the belt to Dusty Rhodes, and you get a run throughout the summer of 75 with that big heavyweight title there of the state of Florida.
Well, the part about with Bill Watts, what was very heady to me, very kind of not thrilling, but it was important, was he was a booker. He was running everything. So he was, I'm not sure. Eddie Graham might have come to him and said, "Hey, you're going to be leaving, Bill. Why you don't mind? I'd like to put the title belt on Bob Roop." I don't know. I had no idea a way of knowing that. The fact that he was a booker, I was still young enough in the business that the booker, he was the boss, kind of. He wasn't the one who made the payout, but he was the one at the show directing it. It would be like a movie director. He's the guy in charge.
Right.
He's the one telling everybody what they're going to do. And to me, that was the role. The guy that had the say-so of what was going on. Whether, and it didn't matter to me, win or lose. I didn't care about that. But I cared where he wrote me in his book. Did he write me on that first match, or did he write me up closer to the top? And Bill was, like I say, Bill was always good to me. But, yeah, I was impressed that Bill did a job for me on TV because, a lot of guys with big egos are going to do that. If you're on tape, if you're on tape somewhere, for all you know, that'll last forever, even back then. So
Eddie might have had a little say in regards to where you were going to be on the card, but it was the Cowboy doing some of the booking there during your big main event run in 75. And of course, he put you over on his way out of the territory. So it's less of a surprise when you think about your run here. Bill Watts was there to see this run happen in 75. And he says, absolutely, I'll give Bob Roop a shot here in the Mid-South territory when he picks you up in 1981. So makes a little more sense now. It all goes together.
Right. I tell you how I know he respected my work, because when I talked to him, when I called him about coming in, the only thing we said about my going opposition to Ron Fuller was his comment that you wasted a year, Bob. You wasted one of your best years, which, making money, because he was right. That year that we were in the weeds and working with the Papa, I don't know, I might have made $20,000 total. Working for Bill, I could have made 80. So, he was right. And I mean, that's a big deal.
It was basically a compliment telling you wasted away a year of your life, because he's telling you could have accomplished a whole lot more.
Yes, it was a compliment. And I looked at that more now, but even back then, I looked at it as him treating me like a peer, like an equal. And, the thing is, he had an amateur background somewhat. So he respected my background a lot. So that was really heady coming from Bill. But what a great start! What a good way to get started by having a guy who'd been a top guy there for however long he was there, to have him come out and put me over right in the middle of the ring on TV.
More often than not, back in the day, unless you were a Dusty Rhodes or a Junkyard Dog, your time would come and go in a territory. They'd kind of run out of ideas for you. They'd done everything they could do. And that was what was great about the territories, is they could ship you off to another one to get yourself over all over again, whether a baby face, a heel, whatever storyline. Maybe you recreate a storyline you've already been involved in. It was successful somewhere else, and you try that again. Right. And here you've been with the Florida territory for the entire year of 1975. And in many cases, it would be time for someone to be shipped off, time to go once again.
Yes.
But you're going to stick around another full year. And then a few weeks after that, they come up with some new ideas for you here, and they certainly work. And it's kind of happenstance in some ways. I don't know if they had planned for this to take off the way it did or not, but boy, does it take off immediately. And what I'm talking about, guys, is Bob Roop's brand new tag team here in January of 1976. With one Bob Orton Jr., the father of Randy Orton, the son of Bob Orton Sr. Yes, guys, I'm talking about the former bodyguard of one Rowdy Roddy Piper, the ace cowboy Bob Orton, and you guys were sensational as a tag team.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you talk about something getting over. Both of us individually had the ability to be a good tag team partner. Bobby had a lot of experience working with Dick Slater as a partner. He had some good moves that he could suggest that were like tag team moves, where the two of you work together to affect a move where you end up taking over on a guy just legally. I mean, we do it. We wouldn't have to always run in and hit the babyface from behind. We could take over legally. And that's what made it, when we did cheat, got even more heat, because we made it pretty clear that we didn't really have to. But when it came to look like maybe we were going to get beat, we would break the rules. And that's one of the things that got us our heat. But we were a very effective, a very efficient tag team. What we did, everything had a purpose. One step A led to step B, led to step C. And Bobby and I, most of our time talking in the car, going to and from shows, even on the way back. We might be drinking beer and maybe smoking a joint, but we'd be talking about the business. We'd be talking about high spots and different situations. We knew what our bookings were coming up, and this started from the very first. Every night going to a show, we would talk about what we might do in the finish. If we were going over, if they were going over, if it was going to be a DQ, if it was going to be a count out, whatever it was going to be, we had a finish. I remember Jody Hamilton was the booker at this particular time we were in Jacksonville. I just went up to him and said, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "Buy this," and I gave him the finish. It took about 15 seconds. And he said, "You're good." And one moved on. And he appreciated that. I mean, he didn't say, "Oh, thank you, Bobby," and all that. But he appreciated it.
Right.
Because, I got respect from him for that. Because obviously I was paying attention to business. And I cared myself about what we were going to do.
It really that was paid off for the fact that you and Orton got along. You guys rode together in the car. You have a few beers together. You had a few laughs together, and you were there you guys were able to, like you said, kind of plan out your matches, not move for move, but some high spots, some team spots, and to finishes and whatnot. Even if the other team was going over, hey, let's throw these ideas out there, see if everybody likes them. Because you look good when they look good. Everybody looks good at the end of the day if they do it right, if the finish comes off the right way. And so you've talked in the past about some partners that you didn't necessarily get along with. I'm not saying you dislike them, but you guys just didn't gel well outside of the ring together. You didn't have the same look on life. So you would see them at the arena, and then that was it. And with Bob Orton, it was a little different. You guys were riding together. You guys were talking constantly. You guys were coming up with ideas, and it really pays off here in short fashion.
Well, the epitome of what you're talking about was Bob Orton Jr., my partner, and then when I was working with Bob Orton Sr. for a while, when Bobby became the Florida champion.
Right.
Senior had his own shtick. We didn't do any tag team stuff like Bobby and I did.
Right.
Well, Senior couldn't move around like Bobby and I did. Bobby and I used to run around. I mean, we duck out of the ring. One of us would duck out of the ring, get the babyface to chase us back in the ring, and about the time Bobby dropped down, I'd hit the guy with a high knee. Bobby would tag me, for example, crisscross. So the babyface wouldn't see it, and Bobby dropped down, and as the guy jumped over him, I'd hit him with a high knee. Well, it looked like it killed him, and we had the timing right. In fact, a couple times we did clip people.
Right.
We got Steve Kern, Jake the Snake, and Ted DiBiase all had a little cut. Didn't need stitches, but at the bottom of their chin, where I hit him with that high knee. It wasn't a knee that hit him. It was the side of my leg. But I was too high. It was my fault. I apologize for it. I told them they moved. Of course, it wasn't my fault, but I did apologize. But what happened is here's the choreography. You got a lot of running around, boom, 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 and then you do that, and it just stops. The guy's down. His partner's going, "Oh my God," because now it's 2-on-1. He's all alone out there because his partner looks like he's half dead, and it just stops, and people, it's like. You really got people's attention.
It was like a gunshot, really.
Yes. We were all on the same page. All the guys we were working with, just about every tag team we worked with, those guys were not two guys with egos that were trying to be the best babyface. We wouldn't tolerate it, for one thing. Fair play for everybody. If we're going to beat on one guy, we're going to beat on the other guy too. Because when it's comeback time, we're going to let both guys come back too, also. Yeah, it was, boy, you talk about excitement. Like you said earlier, probably time for me to be winding up. Certainly my single career. I've been there a year and I've done jobs everywhere. It's the same old face. So what do? You add another face. No, actually, don't add a face, you add a heel. But by putting Bobby and me together, all of a sudden I had a new look. And boy, I'm going to be talking about interviews. You can go out there here. They thought I was Mr. Soon to be gone, and I'm back bigger than ever. You thought you were done with Bob Roop? I don't think so.
Right, guess again.
And I tell you, it was heady time because the matches were exciting. There was electricity in the air. Mm-hmm. When we went down to the ring, you could feel it because they knew. I mean, within seeing us one time in whatever building they were on or on TV, they knew. And watching our interviews, I did most of the talk. In fact, I did 95% of it because Bobby had a stutter if he got nervous. So I was doing the interviews too. And which, don't get me wrong, I'm glad in a way, having been there longer, it helped me get my heat back by being able to talk. Yeah, when we came to the ring, people knew that after the first time they saw us, they knew they were going to get a good match. They were going to get a show. They were going to see something. Whether it pissed them off or whether they enjoyed it, they knew they were going to be getting their money's worth. And we did that. Bobby was always in great shape, still is. I saw him a month or so ago. Still looks good. He's 70. I was down. I was about 230 and in good shape myself. We were able to run around. I was probably at the peak of my athleticism in my 30s. And so, yeah, we were able to go out there, and if we needed to go an hour or whatever, that was no problem either. Mm-hmm. We didn't sit down, grab a hold, do the Johnny Valentine front face lock thing. We still ran around. We would probably spread it out a little bit. I was looking at some of the stats where we did 45-minute matches in Tampa with the Briscoes. And I'm sure that we would settle down more than if we were just going 20 minutes. We would spread it out. We would spread out our actions.
Well, it makes sense. You're going longer.
Oh, yeah. But they were always good. You know what? And the guys enjoyed, even the guys that got beat, they enjoyed working with us because we always cheated them. We didn't overpower or just outmuscle and just be better. We had to cheat them. We had to do something. Sure. Wrong guy, one tagged in or whatever. We had to do something that was to give them an out. Plus, they had a great match. And when they would be going back to the dressing room, people weren't saying, "Oh, you suck." They said, "Oh, man. Oh, you guys got screwed. Oh, you had them," And I tell you the tale of how after our matches, the guys we work with always came up and thanked us and shook our hands. I was on my way to do the same to them, because they're the ones, in most cases, that did the job. But you know what? When you start out getting over, yeah, there's people who are letting you beat them. But once you get over, now it's your turn. You're the ones that get getting beat every night.
Right. We're going to get into what starts the infancy of the Orton and Roop tag team here in regards to probably what really opened a lot of eyes out there and got you guys over. We'll talk about an angle you did at the beginning of 76 here in just a moment. I wanted to point out, though, before we get into that, Bob Orton's background. I'm talking about Junior here. There's a lot of Bobs going on in this episode. Orton Jr. actually tried to break in the very early 70s, but Eddie Graham deemed him too small. He was very lean, a very lanky Bob Orton Jr. there in the early 70s. So he was actually originally thrust in there as a referee, and he was forced to work diligently and extensively, getting trained by Hiro Matsuda and company and whatnot. And finally, after several months, maybe even well over a year, Orton Jr. finally breaks into the business in 72 as a professional wrestler. And here you guys are by 76 now, this brand new tag team. We were talking just off air about this angle, Bob, and I'm going to bring it up here and go back in time to the first thing that made people take notice that you guys were not going anywhere anytime soon. You guys attack Mike Graham on TV. Why don't you tell everybody what happened?
Well, we were wrestling Rip Smith and Abe Jacobs, and we got rid of Abe. We tied Rip in the ropes, and Bobby was just pounding the crap out of him. Looked like he was going to kill him. We had him tied in, his arms tied in, where he couldn't even protect himself. And Mike Graham ran out in the ring to save Rip from getting annihilated, and we are being crippled, and we ended up pile driving him on the floor, and we did the deal where he supposedly hurt his neck. So now Mike Graham and Eddie Graham were the tag team champions at the time, and that's what this whole angle was set up to affect, was to get Mike Graham into a situation where he was going to be in a main event run. To be able to do it was really, really difficult for Mike as a single act because of his size. And his youth, he was young. He was, he's still kind of a kid.
Right.
So to get in there, somebody like Stomper or Tarzan Tyler or something, he looked like the guy looked like he could eat him, And so with Mike, with Eddie, of course. Well, Eddie, of course, loved his son Mike and Eddie Graham, and he wanted the best for his son. So what way to get him in main events is to put him against us. And tag matches. That was what this was designed to do. And the reason, instead of putting Eddie in a neck brace, we put Mike in the neck brace, because we just were starting. We weren't really over yet. Say on 100%. We were over maybe 60, 70%, just on one or two appearances. Mm-hmm. But we hadn't reached top heat yet at all. By getting Mike kind of on the sidelines for a month with the neck brace, while Eddie took on different partners. They did the deal where Eddie was forced to defend the titles, so he took on a partner. He took on Bill Dromo.
Right.
his tag team partner.
You'd think as a promoter, Eddie could find somebody better than Bill Dromo, but
well, you know, it's funny. That's funny. It's poignant, sad in a way, but I think by that time Bill had kind of lost his any youthful exuberance he had for the business. You know, and I'm not trying to knock, but business is hard on you. He acted kind of like he was punching at the factory. You know, it wasn't a big deal. Bobby and I were excited by this. You know, so
sure.
We were happy the idea that we were going out there and we were getting a heck of a reaction from people. You know, we've been working 4 or 5 years, in my case, to learn how to work, and finally you see it all come together, and you're making it happen, and nobody's telling you how to do it. You're doing it yourself, except for the conclusion. Well, that's heady stuff. That's great stuff. So our careers were on the way up, and Bill's was on the way down.
Right.
I can understand how he could feel like he was. He was never a real Pat Barrett type of real bubbly guy. He was always kind of deadpan and deliberate. He looked like, not smiling. He looked like an act murderer sometimes. But
before we get too deep into this, what I want to do here, if that's okay with you, is the structure for the rest of the show is I've got some excerpts here from an excellent article written by Florida wrestling historian Barry Rose. You know Barry very well, Bob. Yeah, absolutely. Barry's awesome. And I got several excerpts I took from an article he wrote about your entire run here with Bob Orton as your partner and the upcoming return. We won't spoil what's going to come here and later in the episode. And I want to read some of those excerpts to you, get your opinion on them and your memories on them. And also we'll look at some results in between as well, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So I want to start here at the beginning of your run here. We already talked about this. So you took Mike Graham out. He's on the shelf for a month or so with a neck injury. Great way to grab some heat right there on TV. How about that? And so here's what Barry had to say in regards to your first month together with Bob Orton in 76. He says, Roop and Orton Jr. dominated all teams who stood in their way. And on January 27th, we just talked about this, in Tampa, you and Orton captured the Florida Tag Team titles, defeating Eddie Graham and Big Bill Dromo. Dromo, of course, replacing the injured Mike Graham. So that's where we left off in regards to what we were talking about. So I'm going to read a little more here. It says, Roop and Orton, they faced several stiff challenges the next few weeks. Mike Graham recovered on the sidelines. He was seeking revenge, though, so that's in the back pocket. Mike Graham's return, Mike Graham's revenge. So that story already in place while you guys are stepping in the ring with Eddie Graham, who's going and finding anybody he can. And on that list includes the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, for anybody curious out there. So these are the guys you're stepping in the ring with. So it's safe to say that even if you were, I don't want to say on the decline, but even if after you'd already had your main event run, Bob Orton Jr. was still waiting for a run like this. And now you guys are thrust in there with the likes of Eddie Graham and Dusty Rhodes. It doesn't get any bigger than that here in 1976. So that's a hell of a fun time.
Yes, absolutely. I saw that Dusty and Eddie. Eddie was still a major player as a wrestler. He didn't work every week, but he would work often enough. I mean, he worked in Tampa more often than not because, it's his hometown. He didn't have to drive anywhere, but he had his own plane. He didn't care if he had to fly to Miami, but he was still, his name meant a lot. And of course, Dusty was the biggest, Stardust. Yeah, to go against them, especially so quickly. You talk about getting over in a hurry. Now, again, I was over as a single. I don't think Bobby was over much, but he had the ability to get over in a hurry because he was great in the ring. He's one of the best tactical workers I ever saw. He was up there with Murdoch and just some guys who are just absolutely great in the ring of never making a wrong move, always knowing what to do in the ring. So, but Bobby was, a main eventer waiting to happen because, again, one of the reasons that maybe Bobby didn't start working, even though he was small, was because he couldn't interview. He had that speech impediment. So how are you going to get a guy over, as a babyface, a small babyface, if he can't talk, if he can't even do it? I mean, I'm not saying he would have choked up every time, but our whole time together, he never wanted to interview. He never said, Bob, I feel like, I'm being left out here. I don't get, because again, when he got nervous, he had a problem with stuttering. Another ingredient is our pay. our pay doubled in about 2 weeks. So,
you can't complain about that.
That's the part you like, when you go down there and Charlie Lay's looking at you with new respect and saying, "Oh, hey, you finally started making some money, huh? I wonder if you're ever going to get there." But that was it worked out good. Mike being on the sidelines, Mike was, why didn't we cripple Eddie and have Mike be the one chasing us? Because it would be better to build sympathy on Mike, having him on the sidelines in a neck brace, while Eddie's going out there and making us even bigger than we were when we hurt Mike. We hurt Mike pretty early in the game. By the time Mike came back, we were established. I think we already worked with Eddie and Dusty. And, so now as Mike's coming back, instead of Eddie and Dusty, it's Eddie and Mike.
There's lots of layers to that story, too, because you guys take Mike out, and now it's Eddie coming for revenge for his son. He's got serious heat with you. And in the back burner, the fans are saying, wait till Mike comes back. And then when he comes back, it's a whole nother level. But, you look at the teams they put you in here with immediately. So you beat Eddie Graham and Bill Dromo for the tag titles. A week later, he finds Dusty Rhodes as a partner. Why couldn't you have done that the week before? I guess it wouldn't have mattered because you beat Eddie Graham and Dusty Rhodes as well. You go on, you beat Jerry Briscoe and Dino Bravo. Jerry goes and calls up Big Brother Jack. And for the next 2 weeks after that, in Tampa, February 10th and the 17th, first, it's Roop and Orton going to a draw with the Briscoe brothers. Of course, Jack Briscoe had been NWA World Heavyweight Champion. You're going to a draw here. And then the following week, Orton and Roop over Jack and Jerry Briscoe. So you talk about building you guys up before Mike's return. They knew exactly what they were doing week to week, masterful booking.
About the going over part, that was 45-minute time limit. So we went 45 minutes. I'm telling you, it was a great match. I mean, those two guys are both super talented. Bobby, I already just talked about being a genius, and I was at the top of my game. So we had just had a really, really great match. Nobody got up to get popcorn during that 45 minutes, I guarantee.
Imagine, yeah. I'd love to see that one on film.
Oh, man, I wouldn't do anything if it was on tape because Bobby and I planned stuff. We would spend our time in the car making up high spots, different ways to do new things people didn't expect. And he had such physical talent, and I did too. Both of us were in great shape and strong and young and agile and quick. And so, we would try to come up with new stuff that nobody else was doing. And by just coming up with one or two different things or doing them in a different way, anytime you can surprise an audience, it doesn't matter what kind of discipline you're talking about, whether it be a stage play or a movie or whatever, where you can surprise people. 99 times out of 100, it's a very positive thing. What we worked on, and again, we were training hard. We were staying in good shape. We had nothing on our mind. Business. When we were together, that's all. Now, Bobby and I didn't hang around together outside. Now, we might have gone to the Imperial Room on Tuesday after the match because he was married. Normally, when we got back to Tampa, he'd go home. What am I talking about? I did too. We only traveled with me and him. We didn't bring other guys because we wanted to talk business.
Right. You want to stay focused on what you guys were doing here.
Yes. We wanted to, and also we were smoking pot.
Well,
which,
I'm sure a few other guys would have been fine with that, but I admire that you guys were very focused on this main event style run you guys were getting. You appreciated what you were getting. You guys kind of saw what it was for what it was, and you guys took every advantage of it. And they gave you the opportunity. Some guys might have dropped the ball here. You guys certainly did not. I mean, because the storytelling, just week to week, not month to month, not the overall picture, but the storytelling week to week is absolutely masterful. From the taking Mike out to Eddie Graham going and getting various partners to what's another established team that can make you guys look good against? The Briscoes. But instead of just putting you over the Briscoes, let's do the draw first so we bring it back. And so then there's really eyes on, I got to see, somebody's going to win this time. And they can't believe it's Orton and Roop who go over on the Briscoes. And then after 6 weeks or so on the shelf, after you guys are set in stone as the top tag team in all the land, back returns Mike Graham, who picks up a myriad of team partners, friends, of his trying to seek revenge. Mike Graham returns to Tampa February the 24th. His first partner, Dickie Slater. No success there for the good guys. Roop and Orton over Mike Graham and Dick Slater. The following week, Graham goes and finds Steve Kern. And this week it's a draw. Roop and Orton going to a draw on March the 2nd with Kern and Graham, which brings the match back, much like the Briscoes match. Same results too there. Roop and Orton over Mike Graham and Steve Kern on a count out. So after all of that, Mike Graham going in and getting friends like Steve Kern, legitimate longtime friend, Dick Slater. These are his friends pre-pro wrestling as far as breaking in goes, right? And Mike Graham's going and get his bestest friends in the whole wide world coming for revenge, and they can't get the job done. So where does Mike turn next but to Papa Bear himself, Eddie Graham, coming out here to team with Mike Graham. March the 16th, 1976, finally, after couple months build and weeks of seeking revenge, it's Eddie and Mike Graham defeating Bob Roop and Bob Orton March the 16th. What story? We're almost 3 months into the storyline now.
By this time, Mike had come back with different partners and had not been successful in exacting, the kind of revenge would be, payback that would be expected of, one being seriously hurt or, suspended or, some kind of a penalty that would justify, would even out what we had done to him. So, and that was good because if all the scores are settled, there's no heat left. So, yeah, we managed to keep the heat. Now, again, because Mike was very, very seriously involved with this, I'm sure Eddie was on top of it, too. You talk about me and Bobby beating Eddie and Dusty in Tampa. I'm sure that wasn't Dusty's finish. Dusty didn't want to get beat by anybody. But that was Eddie's finish.
Right.
Because he wanted to keep us strong for Mike. How to keep us strong for Mike? My God, we beat Dusty Rhodes and Eddie. So...
and the world champion Jack Briscoe. Don't forget that.
Yes. How much stronger can you be? So, and now think about, that's what that was designed to do, was to put Mike in another league in people's mind that, okay, we screwed him around the first time, 2-on-1, of course. Once he came back after being hurt, we didn't cripple him again. We didn't put him out.
Right.
We didn't put him on the sidelines. He was able to stand up to us just like Dusty had, just like Jack and Jerry Briscoe had, just like Eddie had. So that brought Mike up. I'm not sure the fans saw it that way, but looking at it from the outside, I see it that way. Now, again, maybe Eddie was trying to create something that just wasn't possible to create. Mike wasn't that much smaller than, say, Buzz Sawyer in terms of height.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't as stocky, but Buzz had that mad dog attitude.
He sure did.
You had a lot of guys that were not real big that had that vicious attitude. They were scary. They scare you. You think, oh my God, I wonder if this guy's going to bite me or something, He looks like he's frothing at the mouth. So you didn't have to be big. But I don't know, something about Mike. He just didn't have that nasty mean streak. Eddie did. Eddie, you could tell, because he was a nasty guy. Mike, I don't think was a nasty guy. Another thing is he grew up, I don't want to say soft, but Eddie Graham grew up in an alcoholic family, just dirt poor and, having to struggle. I talked to his brother Skippy about their background when I was up there, and we were like two cents waiting for change all the time. They had nothing going. So to make it to the level that he had, it was hard knocks that he got over.
For sure. Yeah.
The hard knocks to leave their bruises on you, on your psyche and your emotional makeup, no matter whether you get over them or not. Even if you get over them, you don't forget them.
Right.
And whatever effect they had on you is still there. So Eddie had that mean streak in him. We talked about some of the stuff, him sucker punching just helpless people and all the stuff that ended up, with him a tragic end. But Mike wasn't there. Mike had been given, Eddie had not abused Mike, except maybe by being too nice.
Right. If you want to call that abuse, I get where you're going with that, though.
Yeah, well, we won't go back to it, but, the Von Erichs and the Grahams and, the tragic and, obviously that treating kids like they're treating them like rich adults when they're 5 years old is not a good plan. But anyway, what I'm getting at, I don't think Mike had to say it was Joe LeDuc. Eddie was Eddie's partner.
Right.
When we did that, we pile drived him on the concrete. He had a neck brace on for a month. When he came back, it was going to be different. It was going to be a lot different.
You guys would have left the territory if that was.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It was going to be a lot different.
Well, we'll hang around till Joe gets back anyway.
Yeah. That being said, I can't blame Mike or Eddie for wanting to put his son into the big leagues and doing everything he could to try to get him there. Part of the problem was that Eddie had made Mike's his upbringing too easy. He had been too easy on him. Mike did not want to travel. He didn't want to drive to Miami and drive to Jacksonville, drive to Fort Lauderdale, all that every week. And Eddie let him get away with not doing it.
Right.
So if you're not going to work everywhere, it's hard to get over. You can't get over in towns.
At least in certain towns, right? In the towns you don't work. Yeah. Good call.
Yeah. That was a byproduct that Eddie was stuck. What's he going to say when his son comes to him and says,
right.
Look, Dad, I got my life, blah, blah, blah. But Eddie kept trying. He kept.
Well, he did a damn good job here. I don't know who came up with this angle, this story. I don't know if it was whoever was booking at this point in time, or if this was an Eddie creation, or if Mike Graham kind of thought of I don't know how clever Mike was in regards to putting angles together and whatnot. But no matter how you slice it, every week, the story, the saga, they know exactly what they were doing. And whether it was, again, I go back to the word happenstance, and everything just kind of worked out. It feels like it was planned out week to week for months on end, because every week it's another stepping stone in the story. And then you talked about last week and how you book a match for a main event, you a storyline that's boiling over, but you also put something on simmer and something in between. And that's kind of what you're doing here for this storyline, because with Mike out, you put something on simmer, Mike Graham on the back burner until he returns. And as Mike returns, you've got the next piece of everybody's saying, okay, Mike's back. They beat Roop and Orton. Storyline's over. Not even close, guys. Because as this is developing, enter Bob Orton Sr., who returns to the territory as a babyface. So his son's a heel, and Orton Sr. initially returns as a babyface. Interviewed on TV by Gordon Soley, and according to Barry Rose, the promo went something like this: Gordon Soley interviewing Orton Sr. about what he thought about his son's shenanigans in the ring alongside that evil Bob Roop. And Orton Sr. said something along the lines of, well, I like the looks of my son's win-loss record, but there are some other things that I'm not all that crazy about. I particularly don't like the attitude he seems to have developed, but I also know that Bobby is no longer a kid, and I have no right to treat him like one. It leaves me in a difficult position, says Orton Sr., who is playing the good guy at this point in time, and we won't spoil what happens later in the story. I'm sure a lot of people can already guess, but we'll get there when we get there. But it's kind of fun to see the dynamic of father and son. Son is the heel, father the babyface. I don't particularly care for what my son's doing, but he's a grown man and he's going to do what he's going to do.
Oh, yeah, that's good stuff. Especially even though he was older, he didn't really look it. He looked like a mature man, but that created all kinds of possibilities when you have a family, that are at opposite ends of kind of how their value systems, where Bobby's like, I don't care what anybody thinks, and Senior's trying to be, abide by the rules and all that. But yeah, that was really smart. I don't know how he got there. I wasn't working in the office then, but I don't know how Senior got there. But that was smart bringing him in. Oh, it
was great development for what's to come, for sure.
Oh yeah, no matter what you're going to do, you've got all these possibilities, and to have an extra body there. I mean, we talked about it with all the groups, Arch Army and Jim Dillon, the Horsemen, and all that. By having a bunch of people, the more you have, if you've got an extra person, that's great, because you can always find some way to put them in there. Have 3-on-2, where you get some interesting heat, and then also, if somebody, for example, got hurt, you need to replace them. You got somebody that's right there that's already over a little, at least some, where you don't have to bring in somebody brand new and try to get them over immediately. So having Senior there was, now you talk about a contrast. He and Bobby and I were so different. Bobby and I were so different. Senior is like almost a different species.
Night and day doesn't even begin to explain the opposites. I would have to imagine between the two eras, the two Ortons, and of course yourself there alongside Mr. Orton Jr. So you guys do the job. Makes sense storyline wise. You find Mike Graham returns. He's finding partners. He finally pops, turns back up. Eddie Graham, Mike Graham defeat Roop and Orton on the 16th. You guys do a return match the following week, March the 23rd. And at that point, you do an injury angle. You're going to injure your knee in this matchup due to the Graham's figure 4 leg lock, and it's going to put you on the shelf, but you had actually suffered a real life injury and you were going to get ready to undergo surgery, if I remember correctly. Can you take us back? Tell us about how you guys worked it into the story here and what really happened to cause said surgery.
My junior year in college, 1967, I hurt my knee, amateur wrestling, and one of my college matches, I hurt my knee, and it was dislocated. It went out and right back in, but it swelled up, and I was on crutches for 2 or 3 weeks, and I had to get treatment. I was in a training room every day, getting ice and heat on it, a month or so, and then it healed and recovered. I didn't need surgery. 6, 7 years later, I was dropping on my knees a lot. And what happened is I hurt my knee again. Same knee, I hurt it again. I had to ice it, and I wore a leg brace and all that. I was constantly sitting there with it raised and on ice. I was able to go to work, but immediately after I finished my match, I would go back to the dressing room and put it on ice again. So I got that healed. And then another couple of weeks went by. All I did, I was on one knee, and all I did was twist. And when I twisted, I came out of joint again, and it swelled up again. And that's when I went to Graham. I said, "Look, I need to get my knee operated on because it keeps coming out, and I'm not gonna spend the rest of my. It's getting worse, Right. So I need surgery." So once I came to them with that, they incorporated my medical problem into an angle of hurting me. They did a deal where we were in a match, Mike and Eddie against me and Bobby, and they did a deal where Bobby was out of the picture somehow, and Mike held my leg up. I was parallel to a corner, and Eddie got up on the top turnbuckle, and Mike held my leg out and raised it, and Eddie dropped a knee across my knee. Of course, Mike let go of my knee or my leg as soon as it did. So they didn't hurt me. But the next day I went and had surgery, and it took 5 weeks. I had a medial disc in my knee taken out. What happened, it's like a silver dollar or say a 50-cent piece. Mm-hmm. It's like a cartilaginous, like cartilage pad between the bones. Well, what happened is one edge of that had gotten chipped where it wasn't completely supportive anymore, and the bone would be able to slip off the side that was chipped, would cause the knee to go out. So I needed to get that out of there. And ironically, I found out later I could have taken 5 weeks off. That alone might have healed it instead of getting it removed. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it took 5 weeks after I got the surgery. I had a cast on my leg for 5 weeks and couldn't do much. I sat around. Couldn't do much. I worked out a little bit, but sat around home. And after a while, I'd go to the matches, but it was dangerous going to matches as a heel and being out in the public.
Right. When you're in a cast. Your leg in the cast. Yeah. They can try to take advantage of you real easy then.
Oh, a couple of times. One time I was up at the ring, by the ring, sitting in a chair. A guy walked up, poured something horrible, tobacco spit or something in the back of my shirt. Just crappy stuff.
It's so funny because even though I know how everything was back then, even though I know how the fans were back then, especially in the South, you don't necessarily think of that immediately unless you were involved in that world. Because I think about today, let's say you're a heel and you're working an injury. I won't call it an angle, but you actually have a legit leg injury. And maybe you're walking around on some crutches in a cast legitimately as a heel. I see the fans, even if they don't really care for you, like, "Hey, Bob," or, "Screw you, Bob," or whatever. But yeah, back then it's like certain types of fans anyway, they see red. It's like, this is it. This is my go. If I'm going to ever get advantage of this asshole, now is the time. He can't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is dangerous. It's silly that I didn't think of that, but very dangerous as a heel.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear stories about how they shanked, Blackjack Mulligan. Look at the size of that guy on his way to the ring. Totally healthy Blackjack Mulligan. So to see a heel in a cast, I can only imagine what they might try to do.
Oh, yeah. It was risky business because I didn't have a cop standing behind me. I'm sitting down there at the ring. Now, there was that guardrail, that steel rail, but it didn't take much for a guy to jump over that and come up and dump some crap on me and go back to a seat or go back or just leave, go to somewhere else. Yeah, it was risky business. I kept an eye and an ear and my pickup ability in terms of the danger quotient is here, because I'd been gone for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
When I was recuperating. By the time I did come out to the shows, they hadn't seen me for a couple of weeks, so my heat had died down. Bobby and Sr. were the ones that were getting the heat by that time.
So that's funny you should say that, because directly after this angle that takes place during that tag team match, March the 23rd in Tampa, I'm going to have to imagine we saw highlights of that on the TV following. But you're actually stretchered out. It's not often we see a heel stretchered out. A lot of times we see the baby face to build sympathy. Mike Graham, you guys did it to Mike at the beginning of the year. And now here, a little revenge for the Grahams, taking Bob Roop out, putting him on the shelf, sending him out on a stretcher. But Bob Orton Sr., the father of Orton Jr., he didn't see it that way, as apparently on the following week's television program, Orton Sr. had this to say. He said, "My son Bobby was Roop's tag team partner in that match, and it could have been him that got hurt. Regardless of who did get hurt, I don't like to see it happen. I've been sidelined with injuries a few times myself, but how are you going to keep the injuries down when people like Eddie Graham and his son can cripple an opponent? It looked deliberate to me, and to get away with it. I don't know what it is with Graham, but I don't figure on going to the hospital because he's decided that injuring his opponents is what wrestling is all about." This is how Orton Sr. all of a sudden sees things. He says, "Nobody's going to make a patsy out of me or out of my son, Bob Jr. Blood is thicker than water, and this time I may have to concede that my kid had the right idea." So Orton Sr. has seen the light of the heels. He returns as a good guy, but he realizes, hey, Roop was only one person away from my son. That could have been my son they broke the leg of. So Orton Sr., essentially, he turns heel in this promo. Classic old school storyline, just simple, makes sense to a degree. I mean, it is wrestling after all. But he joins his son. He aligns himself with the Roop and Orton Jr. stable now, and he's going to replace you in the tag team matches while you're recovering. So it's the Ortons now a tag team while Bob Roop is recovering. But what classic stuff here. Orton Sr., like I said, he was on that back burner. You guys thought it was over. Yeah. Bob Roop's injured. He's on the shelf. They'll do something with him in 6 weeks. Who cares? Wrong. We got the story. It just keeps going the whole time. Orton Sr. slides in as the third member of your heel group.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's an unknown quality at this point. Nobody knows what he's capable of because he hadn't been in much. He's been trying to be a good guy. He's trying to be Mr. Fair, and all his matches during this time were just hilarious. He would be on sometimes first or second match. He wouldn't do anything. He'd go in the ring. He would walk and talk for 10 minutes, might tie up once or twice. Very seldom did much of anything. Watching at the time was going on, this is a crap. I mean, what the hell is this? But, like I say, he was 50 years old. He didn't need to do that.
Right. I think he was probably just biding his time for this heel term. I'm going to assume that the idea when they brought him back originally was always going to be this.
Yes. Yeah, he was going to be involved somehow. They had no real advance notice on my surgery. So, the fact that he was there was really, really appropriate. The other thing, the way he did it with that interview, I don't know. I have no idea if Senior ever said anything like this. This might all be Jerry Prater, the guy who did the programs. Mm-hmm. All this stuff. Well, I know all of my interviews are. The ones, unless I did them on TV on the air, I never did did interviews for a program or a magazine or anything.
Right. And everybody, I think it's been common knowledge over the years, maybe not when I was growing up as a kid, but later on, we would find out, obviously, in the PWIs and all the different magazines and whatnot. It was the writers who were given carte blanche to basically create these interviews that never really took place, as long as, they could show that they knew how to make it look good without looking like a complete idiot while they're writing for you. The magazines got away with writing their own quote unquote interviews with you guys.
Oh yeah. Oh, and that, boy, you talk about like the promotional advertising magazine, the wrestling magazines. Oh my God, that was all fiction. I just made stuff up out of whole cloth. But you know what? I like the way they did this, because there were some promotions that would do something like a babyface would turn heel, and then he would go, "Ah ha ha! I had you all fooled, you idiots out there." Right. I hated that. That was the worst thing you could have done.
It's lazy booking.
Well, it kills. It really hurts promotions. Any promotion that does that, what are you trying to do? Piss people off? Get them to say, "Well, you're right. You did have me fooled." And you know what? Now you're laughing in my face about it. Look, change the channel. I want to watch Wheel of Fortune or something. Screw these guys, because that's the wrong kind of heat to get. Senior could come across. He just had an attitude change. He didn't think any, and Mike had the right to cripple anybody.
In many ways, he's basically turning heel to protect his son and himself. Because if these guys are out here trying to maim people, I'm not going to, there's strength in numbers, right? I'm going to protect my son, Bob Orton Jr., but along with that, maybe my son had it right all along. If they're working against guys that are willing to cripple people, ignoring the fact that that Orton Jr. and yourself had crippled Eddie's son a couple months ago. Classic heel stuff. Only you pay attention to the parts of the story that make sense to you.
Yes. Well, I'm reflecting on the fact that in my interviews, I do recall trying to have a tone in my voice of, okay, I believe what I'm saying here. And I'm really sincere. When I say that I'm in the right on this deal, that Mike Graham had it coming, or he shouldn't have been out there interfering in our match, which is true in a way. I'd always try to give an impression, whether it was a twinkle in my eye or a certain pause at a certain very critical moment where I'd pause in my delivery to let people know that I was BSing them.
Full shit.
I really didn't. I didn't really believe what I was saying, but I was having fun lying to them. And saying like, "Hey, we did the right thing." That other guy ran the ring. He was lucky we didn't kill him. That was put him out for a few weeks.
There are so many guys that make that delivery you're talking about in regards to, you can tell they don't believe what they're saying the entire time they're saying it as a heel. As the character, right. You can tell that, they know that so-and-so didn't have that coming, but I love, and there's not a lot of guys that cut promos like yourself that did that way. And those were the ones you really want to get your hands on, because those were the guys that would sit there. And they said it with conviction. And then that just like that simple look off camera, like these assholes are actually buying this. And you continue your story, and those were the best heel promos out there. Yeah. So, I totally get, and I don't know that I appreciated that as a kid, but as an adult, when I go back and watch this, I go, you got to respect, it's a whole new respect for that type of heel promo. Yeah.
Like you make the most sincere, a minute promo. If you're not doing, and
right.
If you're actually doing you're doing a minute is a long time. So if you do your promo, and you're serious as the day is long. You're swearing on a Bible. And then as soon as, when you finish, the last thing you see on your face is like kind of a smirk, like a little shit-eating smile. Like, take that one and see if you're buying any of this crap. And where people say, he's a lying bastard. He didn't. Because, you come across credible saying, well, you make a case. He had it coming. Look at what he did. He absolutely had it coming. But what you do is, even if he did have it coming, you didn't have to give it to him. He didn't need to get it.
Right.
And the other thing is, you enjoy it a hell of a lot more than you're supposed to, because you're supposed to be punishing somebody. You're not supposed to enjoy it. The only people who enjoy punishing people are sadists and masochists. So Yeah, that part was fun. This whole era was fun.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon-exclusive Watch-Along series, covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon-exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews. Sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
It's a hell of a year. We're only at we're still in the early stages. We'll be getting to Steve Kern probably on the next episode, and that's going to be an entire episode in of itself, the storytelling there. But it's funny. You got two big giant story arcs throughout basically all of 1976. And boy, were you treated to some really great guys to work with, as well as just the stories themselves. You got to be a part of them, and you made it work from your end. As you're on the shelf, but you're going to actually continue to do some commentary from time to time with Gordon on TV throughout this period where you're recovering from surgery. And that's where I'm going to go back to Barry Rose's article here. It states here, the NWA passed a ruling that Orton Jr. could retain the Florida Tag Team titles with a new partner of his choosing. Now, not unwisely, Orton named his father to share the championship. Makes sense. So the Orton and Orton connection born here as the heel turn now official. The Ortons are the tag team champions while you recover. While recovering from the legit cartilage surgery on your knee, Gordon Soley doing the interviews with you on TV. So you get to stay on television from time to time to continue to keep your heat and state your case. And you were adamant during this period that you were permanently injured. Your wrestling career would be over. You could never return to the ring. You say, I'll be lucky to ever properly walk again. That's pushing it a little bit, but I love it. The Grams used that figure four, and you were talking about what they did to you to put you on the shelf. You blame the figure four, though, to deliberately cripple you. Well, they may have put you out of action, but you're still going to cramp their style, and that's just what you're going to do. At that point, you say the NWA policy is that any hold that can be used to permanently injure an opponent will be banned from competition. Well, your wrestling career was ended thanks to the Grams and that figure four, and that hold has got to be banned, you say, for the future in the interest of keeping professional wrestling above the level of barbaric combat. I love it. My family attorneys have already started working on the case. We are going to the NWA, present them with the facts, and then they will have no choice but to outlaw this barbaric hold once and for all, the figure four.
My family attorney. I don't know.
I've got to pick a family attorney.
Yet. But, that was good stuff. Play the victim. I'm the one.
Poor Bob Roop, right? That's where it came from. Poor Bob Roop, right?
Yes. There you go. Yeah. Backward and forward. Poor Bob Roop. Playing the victim was always great. Sanctimonious. You're talking down to them like they're the ones that are cheaters and the no good people and the liars and all that, and you're sanctimonious and you're all proper. That's been SOP forever. A lot of heels dressed up like baby faces in real life. I'm talking about regular people do the wrong things for their own purposes and try to make it sound like they're doing good. But that worked out. That worked. Another factor that I wanted to bring up is that guys enjoyed working with us because the matches got over, and they were always, I guarantee you, no matter what the finish was, they were stronger after the match with us than they were when it started. Right. Because we would build them up during the match. We didn't get heat by pounding on guys for 10, 20 minutes. We would wrestle around for a while, and Bobby and I both could, do a lot of, I don't mean amateur moves, but we could do holds and moves that would lead into high spots and things instead of just like starting out meat chopping and pounding people. But we would have wrestling matches in the pro sense of getting holds and fighting back and forth and using trickery and cajolery and whatever.
I think
try to get the upper hand.
I think that's what made Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson so successful. They used that type of formula. It wasn't just we're the heels, we're going to cut you off, we're going to take over, we're going to beat the crap out of you for 20 minutes, make the comeback, go home. It's a different style here where you guys are giving them a little bit to shine. It's a little back and forth. It's a little more entertaining. It's keeping the fans engaged until it's time for the heat.
Exactly, Ray. And here's what Bobby and I had, what I mentioned earlier about us both being in good shape. What that allowed us to do was to work our butt off to get the guys over that if we were going to be beating them, we wanted them as strong as possible they could be before we beat them. We might not have had to get a ton of heat, Maybe we didn't have time. We get a little heat, and it looked like they were killing us. Mm-hmm. And then we do pull out, but definitely they're going to win the match. And then we do some kind of cheating of some kind,
right?
Illegal switch or something, and win the match. We had a ton of heat because we won. We looked like we were going to get beat. If you go out from the beginning and you look like you can beat the guys easily, when you do beat them 30 minutes later, there's 3 or 4 questions. What the hell took you so long? And what's your problem? You could beat them so easy, but we always made it look like we were beatable because no matter, for example, we might do a high spot earlier in the match where the one I was talking about where I would catch the guy coming off with a high knee, and then just drop him. I remember Steve Kern one time going down, just looked like it killed him. And then later on in the match, we went to do it again. Instead of, when I went up for the high knee, he sidestepped me and clotheslined me. And I took the bump, and it looked like it killed me. Well, you talk about getting a pop. Mm-hmm. And then he made a hell of a comeback on me and Bobby. And then we went ahead and did whatever we were going to do for the finish. But the guys like working with us because they come out of there, and people would be saying, oh, man, you had them. Oh, God, good match and all that. So, and then, plus it was fun, too. It was easy. We had the fans. They were with us. They were buying the match. I don't remember ever one time doing one thing that ever looked like it wasn't real. We weren't real stiff. We didn't do a lot of punching either. We would punch here and there, but we'd do things like drop elbows and, slam guys and throw them hit them with an elbow, hit them with a knee in the gut. Maybe once in a while, double clothesline or something like that. But we didn't do a lot of punching. We didn't beat them up from pillar to post because, to me, that was an expose anyway. But yeah, those are great memories. What happens when we're doing these stories together? What happens, Ray, is that I'm taken back in my emotional and psychological state. I'm taken back to that time, like right now, this last hour. And what comes out is the feeling I had then. I'm revisiting all this in my mind. I'm seeing pictures of us running around the ring, for example, with Steve Kern and Mike Graham. Mm-hmm. And I'm going back and I'm thinking about how I felt. It just comes on me, how I felt at that time. And it was really an exciting time. It was the same old business, nasty, dirty business. Still down there in Tampa, the Snake Pit. I mean, we were not in the Snake Pit that night, of course. We were at the Armory, but, same old, nasty office and all the crap going on. But in our vocation of being pro wrestlers, it was really, really a good time. We were creative. We had an effect. We could go out there and, we could control our audience. We could make our audience go crazy. We could have them happy as hell 1 minute, and 30 seconds later, have them infuriated. So, that's it wasn't the idea of being able to say, oh, yeah, we fooled them. No, that's not it at all. Idea was these people paid they paid my bills. So our fans, I wanted them to have a good show. I wanted to be able to say, well, I don't know about pro wrestling, but that match, I believe, was real. I believe that those guys what they're doing out there is real. You can't do that. They can't have jumped that guy jumped off the top rope and dropped a knee across that guy's face. And the guy does a backflip in the air without it hurting him or without it being real. Sure. It was real. Yeah, no expose. If you the thing with Johnny Valentine, Graham asked him, how did you develop your style? Valentine said, I watched myself on TV. Everything I did that looked bad, I quit doing it. If it didn't look good, I didn't do it. But I've gotten now where I do about 3 or 4 things. That's all. But they look good. They're believable. That developed his style. Well, that makes sense to me. You could have a 59-minute match. You could do something in the last minute that'll make them forget all about that 59 minutes to where it all becomes phony because you expose it in the last minute by what you do. You do something that's obviously not real, and somebody sells, for example, without getting hit or whatever you do.
It was great, because we've seen so many times in the territory era anyway, where they would do an injury angle, but the guy necessarily wasn't really injured. We hear tales of when the Freebirds originally blind the Junkyard Dog, he had to sit at home because he couldn't go out in public because he wasn't really blind, right? So he couldn't just go out to the bar or, go to the grocery store while he's working this blind angle because people believe. But in this instance, you legitimately had to go under the knife. You had surgery. So the cast was real. The injury was real. The recovery was real. And they worked you back into TV. You do some interviews with Gordon. You're doing some commentary alongside Gordon here during this period while you're away. And I'm going to go on with a little more here from Barry. He said, within a couple weeks, the NWA passed a ruling deeming the figure 4 an illegal hold. Hey, the family attorney's work, Bob. If and when Roop could return to active competition, however, the hold would be reinstated as legal. That's the key note there, guys. Pay attention. Roop, now using a cane for assistance to his damaged leg, was still insisting that his in-ring career was finished. I'll never wrestle again, stated Bob. My doctors think I'll be able to walk eventually, but competitive sports are out of the question. Meanwhile, Eddie Graham chose his own philosophical approach to the banning of the finishing maneuver. Eddie liked to use that move. But he says, the way I look at it, no, this is classic Eddie Graham here. He says, it's sort of like watching your mother-in-law drive a new car off a cliff. I've made a lot of good use out of the figure 4, but I can get along without it. I wrote, wow, classic Eddie Graham line there. My goodness, I can get along without it. He says, I can also get along without Bob Roop. Either way, I'll take it as it comes. Roop is the guy who has the problems. He brought them on himself, and he's welcome to them. All I can say is that if he ever does decide to get back in the ring, I'm going to give him a few more.
That's the classic Eddie. Him saying it too.
To think about being a babyface and using such a line, I'm sure people had a good laugh at it at the time. It wouldn't go over too well today, but back in the day, people enjoyed a good joke. I hope that was a joke like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Eddie, he wasn't a white meat babyface, that's for sure.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. He was a nasty. He looked nasty, and he was nasty. And pro wrestling, you've been doing it for 30 years. You've had some, you've got some violence in your life, don't you? You've been doing this for 30 years. Him doing those kind of promos, and that was great. Maybe that was another problem with Mike, being contrasted with Eddie, because they were so different. I'm sure that Eddie, when he was Mike's age, was a completely different kind of person than Mike was, because they'd been raised so differently. But, Eddie was going to do, again, whatever he could to try to get Mike to that status. I don't know how long Eddie figured he was going to be around, but I don't know if Mike needed to make any money. I think he already had a business and had his own business and was making plenty of money. So maybe Eddie wasn't worried about that. Maybe Eddie Mike wanted to be a wrestler and to have that status of being a pro wrestler. And it was Eddie's only son. So the Graham name was going to be continued. I mean, someone of true blood, it was going to have to be Mike. Anyway, he did everything he could. You talk about having your own promotion and, a cast of like 25 people that you can use to whatever way you need to try to create the effect you want. And he did a good job. The whole time we were doing this, we were drawing money. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah, even with you on the sideline, Orton Sr. slides in to team with Orton Jr., and they continue the storyline while you're recovering. And then 6 weeks after Roop's injury, a masked wrestler arrives in the territory by the name of the Gladiator. And this is not the Gladiator that was there leaving as you were coming in, breaking in back in 69, Ricky Hunter. No, this is an entirely different Gladiator, guys. And he quickly aligns himself with the Ortons of all people. Imagine that. So the Gladiator billed as a skilled athlete who also used the shoulder breaker as a finishing maneuver, the same shoulder breaker that Bob Roop had used to win many of his matches throughout his career. In fact, the Gladiator was the same height and weight of Mr. Bob Roop, and fans throughout the state were even shouting Roop at this poor guy. Every city he went, people thought he was you.
What a copycat that guy was, man.
Using your moves and everything.
Why would anybody want to copy me? I mean, my God. That guy, I felt close to him for some reason, when he was out there. Those Grahams deserved to have somebody on their case. I'm glad he was out there.
Probably for good reason. So the Gladiator breaks into the Florida territory. Eddie Graham states that he was positive he knew who was under that mask. And on the last Championship Wrestling from Florida program of the month of May, Eddie, as well as Mike Graham and even Jerry Briscoe, interfered during a matchup featuring said Gladiator, as Mike Graham holding him down, holding him by his arms, Eddie Graham ripping the mask off. You got me, Bob. It was Bob Roop all along. Eddie said he had a pretty good idea of who was under that mask, and sure enough, Bob Roop, shame on you.
Well, I had, you know what? I think I had amnesia or something during that time.
Didn't know who you were? He took the mask off, you looked in the mirror, said, oh, I'm the Gladiator. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was glad they took the mask. I hated working under a mask.
I was going to ask you, what was that like, working under the mask? You know, Gorilla Monsoon would always sell the mask. It's tough to work under, not on just the breathing, and you have to kind of deal with that, but the peripheral wasn't as good, especially depending on the mask. But really, at the end of the day, I just imagine it has to be hot under the hood, right?
Well, I'm claustrophobic.
Oh.
So it's terrible working under a mask.
I'd say so.
I mean, there were times I just almost felt like I need to rip it off because claustrophobia, any phobia is not a fear. It's a terror, but it's not based on rational thought. You know, people who are uncomfortable with being in crowds, public speaking, whatever it might be. People are literally terrified of it. Well, public speaking is not going to cripple you, or but you're going to go up there and make a fool out of yourself, whatever it is. Or people are absolutely terrified by it. Well, claustrophobia is the same thing. You can have a panic attack, or you could be Andre the Giant and be put in a situation where you have a panic attack where you're terrorized by your own personal psyche or emotional problem. Right. So, I mean, I'm not apologizing for being claustrophobic, but it was real. And we still have it. So, yeah, I didn't like working under the hood, under the mask. I was glad when they took it off.
It was a fun way to reintroduce you into the story, though. Yeah.
I agree. I was ready to get back. And
even though in real life you wanted the mask off, storyline purposes, you wanted to keep it on because that kept the figure 4 banned.
Yeah. Well, looking back at it now, Bob Roop was over 50 times more than the Gladiator was. Although he was over a little, mainly because it was Bob Roop under there. But being able to come back and be the character who I really was, it was like opening the door and walking out, and all of a sudden you matter again. Because a lot of people, not everybody that came to the matches had watched the TV or was up to date on what was what, didn't know the storylines. Most of the people that had come to the matches, they knew who Bob Roop was. So I had my heat or my reaction, whatever it might be, babyface or heel. But I enjoyed, our faces are by far our most prominent means of expression.
Right.
Our face. That's why we talked about mentioned in the past episode about Mr. Wrestling 2, Johnny Walker, being able to do everything he did with that mask on, because you referred to the fact that your face is what you can use to express every emotion.
Right.
Where with the mask on, you can't see any. Yeah, I was glad to have all my tools back and be able to do interviews and things where I could express myself, because with the mask on, even if they know who you are, you're still kind of only partially I wasn't who I wanted to be. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I was glad when they took the hood off.
Couple more quick excerpts here in regards to the story of the Gladiator. Comments made by both Eddie Graham and yourself. I don't know if these came from the programs and Jerry Prater. I'm not sure if these were basically broken down from television interviews, but I got one from each side here. First, Eddie Graham says, a wrestler knows another wrestler by his moves, not his face. That's why I decided it was time to take the mask off, so that everyone could get a good look at the man behind it. Well, Roop got the figure 4 leg lock, the hold, which laid him up, barred temporarily, pending the outcome of the injury. I'm not trying to substitute my judgment for that of the NWA, but I did think that they should know what was going on. And I thought the people in Florida were entitled to know what the score was too. And Bob Roop explaining his version of the events. I love this here. He talks about a miraculous recovery It's a shame that a miraculous recovery had to become the basis for reinstating this figure 4 hold. I wore the mask for the good of professional wrestling. I can only hope that the NWA will realize this and that they will make the ban on the figure 4 permanent, a permanent part of the NWA rules and regulations for the conduct of pro wrestling matches. So you were wearing the mask, not just for yourself, not to fool anyone. You were doing it for the good of professional wrestling. Keep that figure 4 hold banned. I love it.
Oh, for the good of mankind in general.
There you go.
Yeah. I think if they'd have kept it banned, I think, let's see, Dory Funk Sr., Ric Flair, how many other guys would have been really SOL, crap out of luck with their finish holds. Yeah, that was good stuff.
So Gladiator immediately, when he makes his debut, aligns himself with the Ortons. Of course, you're unmasked to be the Gladiator. Unfortunately, unmasked, well, not for you in real life, but for me as a fan reading this, I would have liked to have seen it played out a little longer. But unmasked is Bob Roop. There you are. And in the meantime, Bob Orton Jr. wins the Florida heavyweight title. And so you easily slide back in as the co-holder of the Florida tag team titles. Your new partner, Bob Orton Sr., and we talked about this day and night, not just as human beings, but certainly as partners as well. I have to imagine Bob Roop did a whole lot of the work at this point in time.
You know what? What you just said, that's probably why they did it. I always wondered why they took the mask off. It's probably why they did it. They wanted to put the belt on Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
But if Bobby was going to have to give up the tag title, his share of it, well, what you had left was Senior and the Gladiator. And neither one of them had any right to the belt, right? Or to the tag belt.
Not the original champions, right?
No, not neither one, but Bob Roop did. So Bob Roop coming back, I could hang on to half the belt, and then get Senior declared the other title, other belt holder. I never did figure out why they took the mask off then. Just thinking about it now, that might be the reason.
Yeah, that would explain why it was happened so quickly, because it felt like, especially the way stories were told here in Florida, it felt like it would have taken a little longer to get to that. But they do it pretty fast here, just within a matter of weeks. And obviously, though, you were immediately slid back in as co-holder of the tag team titles, a title you never actually lost. So you get to be champion once again. This time, Orton Sr. stays with you, and it's you and Orton Sr. moving forward as the Florida tag team champions.
Right. There's another factor that I'm aware of, too. I was much better in the ring without the mask, without the tights, without the snug tank top,
Sure.
With the Gladiator's clothes.
Yes.
It was like I didn't have, it was loose. The whole upper body, it was like I didn't have anything on that I even noticed. Whereas when I was in that stuff, especially being claustrophobic, when I was in that stuff, I felt completely different.
Right.
So that might have been another thing. I know I still remember this day that I was glad when I got to go back to being without the hood and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't run around the ring with the vision impaired a little bit, like the peripheral, like they talked about. I couldn't run around with the same abandon that I could as Bob Roop. So, yeah, I was glad to get back to my regular MO.
Yeah, and it didn't take long for Bob Roop to reappear, the Gladiator unmasked. You're going to work a match in St. Pete by May 22nd, singles match, scoring a win over Abe Jacobs. And then right after that, that's when you slide back in to the tag team scene. And I'm just looking at some of the matches here. Orton Sr., now your partner. You guys go to a draw with Billy Robinson and Jerry Briscoe on the 25th, June 1st in Tampa. It's Jack Briscoe and Greg Valentine beating you guys in some way, shape, or form. Must not have been the titles on the line there, because you guys are still tag team champions, and you go into a match June the 8th, Orton Sr. and Bob Roop, to a no contest with Jack and Jerry Briscoe. So you guys are making some waves as a tag team, maybe not as fun as Orton Jr., I would have to imagine, in there, but nevertheless, You guys are still rocking it here, and we're 6 months into this story, this triad, this unit, this group between you and the Ortons, the Bobs. That would be very confusing. I can't imagine how that worked for Gordon Solia. Bob, welcome out here.
Yeah. Well, the matches with Senior, I remember we couldn't do, he couldn't run around.
Sure.
Or wouldn't. Anyway, he didn't run around, let's put it that way. So it was a different match. With some tag teams, it's like there's two different, each guy is different what he does. Senior had his own style, and I'm sure when I was working as Bob Roop as his partner, that I deferred to his experience and all that. I would try to, whatever, if he had a hold on somebody and he tagged me in, I get in, grab the hold, and continue to work it or whatever. But I do remember that the way we got over, Bobby Jr. and I, was the run around I'm talking about. There was a lot of action. When we were going to the ring, I still remember, there would be people who were starting down the aisle, like going to get a Coke or something. I don't know where they were going, to the bathroom, whatever. And they see us come to the ring, they turn around and go back to the seat because they didn't want to miss it.
Oh, this match is next. Okay, I can wait. I got you.
Yeah, they didn't want to miss it because we might start running out. When I say running around, I don't mean them chasing us around the ring, although the chase should be part of it. But the way to get a guy to chase you is to take off. And then, we stopped the chase in a hurry. We didn't run around the ring 10 times. Run around halfway around, and the guy would be stupid enough to follow you out on the floor and then roll in the ring behind you. As soon as he stood up, he caught a knee in the face. It was those kind of dynamics. There was no real pace, of a steady pace to the match. We had surprises everywhere and got into them in different ways. You couldn't see them coming. And that's what people didn't want to miss because wrestling is so repetitive. You see one match, sometimes you've seen them all.
Yeah.
To be able to go out there and, again, here we are, two relatively young guys, compared to Bill Dromo and Bob Orton Sr., we're young guys. We're going out there who are exuberant, hungry, eager, in good shape, been obviously working out, obviously in good shape, got a good attitude, got their act together, obviously coordinating with each other. Bobby and I never gave the impression of actually being two different people. We were like one opponent because we were always on the same page. Yeah, that was really nice. Those were great. Those were great days.
We're winding down your feud at this point against the Grahams and even your group here with the Ortons. As June moves on, you guys are the Florida Tag Team Champions. A great 6-man tag here on June the 15th sees the Grahams, Mike and Eddie, team with Jack Briscoe. They're going to score a win over the Ortons and Bob Roop. That had to be a fun 6-man. June 22nd, it's Roop and Orton defeating the Briscoe brothers in the rematch from the no contest a couple weeks prior when the belts were held up. So you guys are still the tag team champions, or once again, however way you want to look at it. But you turn around and immediately lose the Florida belts to Steve Kern and Bob Backlund. You guys are going to do a rematch on July 6th. Again, it's Backlund and Kern scoring the win. So your time is basically up here with the tag team of Bob Roop and Bob Orton Jr., as well as your entire group here, your unit with the Ortons and Bob Roop. As July begins, a new storyline going to begin with you and Steve Kern. We're going to save that for the next episode. That's going to be a dynamic episode. Barry Rose also wrote an article about that in which he dubbed it The Anatomy of a Feud. And it absolutely is from top to bottom. If you guys enjoyed the storytelling here for the first 6 months of 1976. Wait until the next episode, Bob, when we break down July through the rest of 76. What a run week by week. Your storyline with Steve Kern and everything that goes on in between with his father, Colonel Dick Kern. And that's going to be something else. But I don't want to dismiss this episode yet because I want to talk a little bit as you guys are wrapping up here. Do you remember things just kind of moving on and you drifting away and going about your own business and not really even acknowledging it, the separation? Or do you remember if there was any kind of like sad moment where you're like, damn, I hate to see this team go?
No. We weren't into a lot of domestic returns. We could have kept doing it forever. We could have taken it somewhere else, for that matter, another territory. But we had done it for a while, and, it'd been we're against everybody from Dusty to Eddie Graham, top young wrestlers up there, Bob Backlund and Steve Kern, Jerry Briscoe, Jack Briscoe. We've been out there against, some top guys. So if we're going to stay in that territory with that gimmick, you're going to need to bring us new talent, or have something new, or we have to go in a different direction. And the idea of the thing with Kern, he came to me. I won't go into detail, but it took off within 10 seconds of doing the angle.
Yeah.
I forgot all about all my time with Bob Orton Jr. because I was in another dimension. wasn't aware that I was going to be there. I wasn't real happy about being there, but that thing took off. It was like a bomb going off in terms of heat.
Yes.
Just absolute insane heat. And I should have known. I wasn't thinking.
Wow, when we start breaking that, I read over, I know the story pretty much. We talked about it a little bit in the past here a couple of times on the show, but we're really going to break it down week by week and get your input into every little aspect of it. The matches, obviously the storyline, the angle that breaks on TV that just really, like you said, it's like a bomb going off as far as heat and just generating a new storyline and propelling a mid-card Steve Keirn, a young up-and-comer Steve Keirn, into his first main event caliber. He became a superstar after this. And a lot of people call that feud between Bob Roop and Steve Keirn one of, if not the greatest feud story-wise in the history of championship wrestling from Florida. I mean, it truly is some of the most dynamic stuff in regards to heat. I mean, and you guys are really laid it on the line in the ring, too. I've seen Steve Keirn I know your work, Bob, and I've seen Steve Keirn's. I know you both guys can lay it in, and I can only imagine the emotion you guys brought to those matches. So I'm looking forward to doing that next week. But what a 6-7 month run here with the Ortons, specifically Bob Orton Jr. as a tag team. Like you said, you worked everybody in the territory, unless they were just going to keep feeding you new teams, keep bringing them in for you guys to knock them down. You guys have done basically everything you could do. You took on the Grahams. That story was told over a 6-month period. The Gladiator even made an appearance in the middle of all of that. Wow, it's been a fun ride talking about it here. From the Grahams to the Briscoes, Dusty Rhodes making a drop by there, Tino Bravo, Dick Slater, Greg Valentine, all coming in and trying to help out where they could, but nobody could get the job done till the very end of the day. It was the Grahams seeking their revenge, and then eventually a couple of young up-and-comers who become superstars in their career. Bob Backlund, Steve Keirn dethroning you guys at the tag team titles. The Ortons moved their way. Bob Roop moving in a new direction as well. That direction going to be Steve Keirn, and we're going to talk all about that at length next time here on the program.
I do. One thing I do remember about that period, I did not go outside of my house unless I absolutely had to.
I don't blame you.
I didn't want to be out in the supermarket. I did not want to be out in public. I shared in earlier episodes of having people pull pistols on me.
Right.
And I just walked by and they got a collector turn around, a guy pointing a .45 caliber pistol at me, just out of the blue. I mean, I never didn't speak to him or anything.
Right.
I decided I didn't want to. I had people with that degree of heat. What happens when you get somebody who's not all there, emotionally or mentally? And this was a bad time for that kind of heat. I insulted a military prisoner of war veteran.
Sure.
And that we had the Vietnam War was just over. We had all kinds of Vietnam vets back from
right, and it got all the heat, And when you talk about that, I was thinking about this before we even recorded today too. Was the wrestling fans believed that was enough right there to get them emotionally invested? But you had so many people who were either in the war, returning home, or people who were family, friends of those who were part of the Vietnam War, and so. They didn't have to believe wrestling was real. They might have known it was staged to some degree. They might not have known how it worked, but they knew what you were saying was real. And I could see this upsetting even non-wrestling fans to the degree of getting you heat. So I could see why you stayed home and out of the grocery stores, out of the bars, basically locking yourself in the house because, this is super heat. This isn't a wrestling fan heat, right? This is heat with just about anybody walking on the street if they were made privy to this storyline, right? So it's going to be quite a fun time to get through that next episode. You had a lot to say. I have excerpts of an interview you did with Barry Rose. And I also have, my own information in regards to what I've been able to gather. So I'm looking forward to hearing it from the horse's mouth. However, you, Bob Roop, the man that was involved in the whole thing, breaking that down for us next week here on the show.
Well, it sounds, I don't know, sharing it again. It's not traumatic now, but the fact was that there was a big military base in Tampa, the MacDill Air Force Base. So all the guys in the military, even if they hadn't served in Vietnam, they were aware of what had been going on. Mm-hmm. And the fact that 60,000 dead of our young men and women. So, that was the worst. You talk about.
Well, I know you've mentioned in the past, and I know we'll get into it next week in regards to that, some comments that were made by some of those soldiers there on that military base that were very scary if you took them for their word. And I wouldn't have doubted it at the time with everything that was going on. And we'll talk about it. I don't want to spoil it here for the guys this week, but we will definitely talk about that next week as well. That
sounds good. I survived it. I was lucky I didn't get run over by somebody, but yeah.
Well, you hear the boys, especially the heels, say, boy, we got a lot of heat with that one. And sometimes maybe so, and sometimes maybe they're over-exaggerating. Maybe that's how they felt anyway. But in this instance, yeah, you got a lot of heat bumps. So they put you in a position, and, well, at least you made the best of it out of that anyway. Hopefully you got paid well. And again, we'll talk about it next week, guys. But I guess we're going to wrap it up here this week. I really enjoyed the program, man. And, man, it was fun getting through this. And special thanks once again to Barry Rose and some of his historical work and references he did on this angle. Actually, your entire run here with the Orton family.
Yeah, and I want to thank Barry, too. Thank you, Barry. Your research and your dedication to be a historian for Championship Wrestling for Florida. You have kept track of things that went on back there from before my era all the way through it and past it. And that's just the most sincere form of flattery, is to show respect for somebody's background. And the fact that you kept my history and kept my whole wrestling background alive, we were referring to it today, is a real compliment, something I really, really appreciate. Barry Rose, you know I love you, brother. It's so nice to be able to tell the world that. And Ray, thank you, my friend, for another great couple hours. You so well prepared with. I try to be prepared so you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself, but it's nice that, you make it so pleasant, ability to share this with others. It's real privilege for me, and I really appreciate it. Thank all of you out there for listening. Ray and I couldn't be here without you. So thank you, and everybody please stay well.
And that's going to do it here this week for the Wrestling Stoop. Just a reminder, you guys can friend Bob Roop over at facebook.com/poorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell. Follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. But most of all, I encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many great gifts there, including early show releases, digital downloads, video casts now available, and so much more. Check it out over at Patreon. Help support the brand. And until next time, on behalf of Bob, we ask you guys to hold tight and see where we head next time. Right here on the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.